The email came at 2:13 a.m. Subject line: Unauthorized activity at your property. I almost ignored it. But then I opened the attachment. It was a photo of my house, lights on, and someone standing at my front door. The moment that email arrived changed everything, not because it explained the situation, but because it raised more questions than answers. That is exactly what makes the opening so powerful. Instead of giving clarity, it creates tension. A subject line like unauthorized activity at your property immediately signals that something is wrong, but it does not reveal what or how serious it is. This uncertainty pulls the viewer in because the human brain naturally wants to resolve confusion. When the narrator says he almost ignored it, that adds another layer of realism. People receive emails all the time, and most of them are meaningless. That small detail makes the situation feel authentic and relatable. Then comes the shift, the attachment, a photo. This is where curiosity spikes sharply. A written warning is one thing, but visual proof is something else entirely. The image of his own house, with lights on while he is away, creates an instant contradiction. The audience already knows he is not home, so the presence of light suggests someone else is inside. But who and why? The story does not answer this yet, which is intentional. The lack of explanation is what keeps the audience engaged. The final line of the hook intensifies the emotional impact. Someone standing at the front door. This is not just about property anymore. It becomes personal and invasive. A house is supposed to be a safe space, and seeing a stranger at the entrance breaks that sense of security immediately. The audience begins to feel the same unease as the narrator. There is also a subtle escalation happening here. First, there is an email, then a warning, then a photo, then a physical human presence. Each line raises the stakes step by step, which is a key technique in storytelling. Another important aspect is the timing. The email arrives at 2:13 a.m. That detail is not random. Late-night events often feel more threatening because they happen during vulnerable hours. People associate nighttime with danger, silence, and isolation. By including that specific time, the story taps into that psychological discomfort. It makes the situation feel darker and more serious without needing to explicitly say it. The language used in the hook is also simple and direct. Short sentences, no complicated descriptions. This keeps the pacing tight and makes it easy for viewers to follow. More importantly, it mirrors how people think in moments of shock. When something feels wrong, thoughts become fragmented, quick, uncertain. The writing style reflects that mental state, which strengthens the emotional connection. There is also a deliberate withholding of information. The narrator does not explain his job, his lifestyle, or why he is away so often. That comes later. At this stage, the only goal is to create a strong emotional trigger. If too much information were given up front, it would slow down the pacing and reduce the suspense. By focusing only on the strange event, the hook keeps attention locked in. In essence, the first key point works because it combines mystery, visual tension, emotional discomfort, and controlled pacing. It introduces a problem without explaining it, shows evidence without context, and ends on an image that feels both specific and threatening. It grounds the viewer in reality and builds a personal connection with the narrator. After the tension created in the opening, the audience needs context to understand who this person is and why the situation matters. Without this, the story would feel hollow. By introducing himself as Daniel, 38 years old, the narrator immediately becomes more human. Age adds weight because it suggests experience, responsibility, and a life that has been built over time. This is not a reckless teenager or someone careless. It is someone who has worked to reach a certain point in life. The detail about his job is equally important. Working in industrial maintenance with long rotations explains why he is away so often. This is not a random absence. It is part of his routine. It also adds credibility. Jobs that require long travel are common, and many people can relate to the idea of being away from home for extended periods. It makes the situation believable rather than exaggerated. At the same time, it introduces a subtle vulnerability. A house that is empty most of the month becomes an easy target, and the audience starts to understand the risk even before the main conflict fully unfolds. Financial stability plays a role here as well. He mentions that the job pays well, better than anything he had growing up. This line does more than describe income. It hints at a past filled with struggle. Without going into full detail, it suggests that he worked hard to escape a difficult background. That makes the house more than just a building. It becomes a symbol of achievement, something earned, something meaningful. When that is later threatened, the emotional impact becomes much stronger because the audience knows what is at stake. The description of the house itself is simple but effective. A small, quiet neighborhood with an HOA creates an image of order and safety. Keen streets, rules, and structure. These are all signals that the environment is controlled and secure. This is important because it sets up a contrast. If something goes wrong in a place that is supposed to be safe, it feels more disturbing. The audience begins to sense that the problem is not random crime, but something deeper and more unsettling. The fact that he lives alone adds another layer. No wife, no kids, just him. This detail increases the emotional isolation. There is no one else to notice strange activity, no one to call immediately, no shared responsibility. It makes him more exposed. It also makes the audience more sympathetic because everything rests on him, his absence, his property, his problem. There is also an element of trust introduced here. The HOA is described as strict and organized. They promise control and security. This creates an expectation. When an authority presents itself as reliable, people naturally lower their guard. That is exactly what happens. He does not question their system because it appears professional. This is a critical setup for what comes later because the betrayal will feel more personal and more shocking. The pacing in this section slows down compared to the hook, and that is intentional. After the rapid tension at the beginning, the audience needs a moment to settle into the story. However, it does not become boring because each detail is purposeful. Every line adds either credibility, emotional weight, or future relevance. Nothing feels wasted. By the end of this part, the viewer understands who the narrator is, what his life looks like, and why his house matters so much. There is a clear emotional investment. The audience is no longer just curious about the strange event. They are now concerned about what will happen to this person and what he stands to lose. Up to this point, the audience has questions, but now those questions start forming into a defined problem. The HOA email is no longer just strange. It becomes accusatory. This is important because it places the narrator in a defensive position. He is not just confused anymore. He is being blamed for something he did not do. That immediately creates emotional friction. People naturally react strongly to false accusations, especially when they involve their personal space or reputation. The wording of the complaint plays a key role. Multiple reports of unfamiliar individuals suggest that this is not a one-time incident. It implies a pattern that makes the situation more serious and more threatening. If it were just a single sighting, it could be dismissed as a misunderstanding. But multiple reports mean that something ongoing is happening, and the narrator has no control over it. This loss of control is what drives the tension higher. The audience begins to feel that things are already out of hand before the narrator even has a chance to respond. The confusion is reinforced by the narrator's reaction. He rereads the message multiple times, trying to make sense of it. This is a very human response. When something does not align with reality, people instinctively double-check, hoping they misunderstood. By showing this moment, the story becomes more relatable. It is not exaggerated or overly dramatic. It feels grounded in real behavior, which makes the unfolding situation more believable. The introduction of the photo escalates the conflict further. Written accusations can be denied or questioned, but visual evidence is harder to ignore. The image of a man standing on the porch creates a direct contradiction to what the narrator knows to be true. He is not home, yet someone is physically present at his property. This creates a gap between reality and evidence, and that gap is deeply unsettling. The audience starts to feel the same confusion and tension because there is no immediate explanation. The timeline detail adds another layer of pressure. The photo was taken while the narrator was far away, working. This confirms that he could not have been involved, which strengthens the injustice. He is being held responsible for something completely outside his control. This is a crucial emotional trigger. Stories about injustice tend to engage viewers more deeply because they create a sense of unfairness that people instinctively react to. The HOA's response makes the situation even worse. Instead of investigating or offering help, they escalate the issue with warnings about fines and legal action. This shifts the conflict from a mysterious situation to a direct threat. Now the narrator is not only dealing with strangers at his house, but also facing consequences from an authority figure. This dual pressure increases the stakes significantly. It creates a feeling that he is trapped between two problems, neither of which he caused. There is also a subtle power dynamic at play. The HOA represents authority, rules, and control. The narrator is just a homeowner trying to defend himself. When authority acts unfairly, it creates a strong emotional reaction in the audience. People tend to side with the individual, especially when the system appears rigid or unreasonable. This alignment is important because it ensures that viewers stay emotionally invested in the narrator's side of the story. The turning point within this section is internal rather than external. The narrator realizes that this is not just a misunderstanding. That shift in perception is critical. At first, he is confused and trying to clarify. But once he senses that something is wrong on a deeper level, his mindset changes. He becomes more alert, more suspicious, and more determined. This internal shift prepares the audience for what comes next. By the end of this part, the story is moved from mystery to active conflict. The audience understands that something serious is happening, that the narrator is being wrongly blamed, and that the situation is escalating beyond a simple explanation. Until now, the narrator is dealing with confusing information and external accusations. But this is where the situation becomes personal and invasive. The phone call with the neighbor is a critical moment because it confirms that the problem is real. Up to that point, there is still a small possibility that everything could be a misunderstanding or an error. But when another person casually mentions seeing activity at the house, that doubt disappears. The phrase, "I thought you had guests," is especially powerful because it shows how normal the situation appeared to outsiders, while for the narrator, it is completely unacceptable and alarming. The mention of different people and cars coming at night adds another layer of seriousness. This is not a single incident or one unknown individual. It suggests repeated access and possibly multiple occupants. The idea of strangers freely entering and leaving a private home creates a strong sense of violation. A home is supposed to be controlled space, and losing that control feels deeply unsettling. The nighttime detail reinforces the unease, as activities happening after dark often carry a sense of secrecy and hidden intent. The discovery that the security system has no footage is where the tension sharply escalates. Cameras represent safety, evidence, and control. When the narrator checks them, he expects answers. Instead, he finds nothing. This absence of data is more disturbing than seeing something suspicious because it suggests deliberate interference. The transition from confusion to realization happens here. At first, he considers the possibility of a technical issue, which is a logical and grounded reaction. People tend to assume simple explanations before jumping to conclusions. This keeps the story realistic. However, the system logs reveal something much more serious. The cameras were not malfunctioning, they were intentionally disconnected. This detail changes the entire nature of the conflict. It is no longer about unknown trespassers alone. It implies planning, access, and knowledge of the system. Someone did not just enter the house, they made sure they could not be recorded. This introduces a sense of intelligence behind the act. which makes it more threatening. The emotional impact on the narrator is also important in this section. His physical reaction, shaking hands, inability to sleep shows how deeply this affects him. These are natural responses to fear and loss of control. The audience can easily relate to the anxiety of knowing something is wrong but not having clear answers. The sleepless night emphasizes that this is not a small issue that can be ignored. It stays with him, grows in his mind, and forces him to act. The memory of the HOA inspection serves as a crucial connecting detail. It feels minor at first, almost like an afterthought, but it carries significant weight. This is how the story begins to link the external authority with the internal problem. The narrator recalls giving access to his home for a routine check, which seemed harmless at the time. This moment introduces the idea that the breach may not have come from an outsider breaking in, but from someone who was already allowed inside. That realization adds a sense of regret and self-doubt. He starts questioning his own decisions. Booking the flight home marks the transition from passive concern to active response. It shows urgency and determination. He is no longer waiting for answers through emails or calls. He needs to see the situation for himself. This decision raises the stakes because it signals that the truth will soon be revealed. The audience anticipates that whatever he finds will be significant. The pacing in this part is carefully controlled. It builds step by step, moving from confirmation to discovery to realization. Each moment adds more pressure, both emotionally and logically. By the end of this section, the situation feels larger, more organized, and far more dangerous than it initially appeared. Up to this point, everything has been based on reports, missing footage, and suspicion. Now the narrator physically returns home, and the truth begins to reveal itself in a way that cannot be ignored or explained away. The moment he arrives, the environment plays an important role. Everything looks normal from the outside: clean yard, quiet street, nothing out of place. This creates a false sense of calm, which makes the discovery inside even more impactful. When expectations of safety are suddenly broken, the emotional reaction becomes much stronger. The first shift happens through something subtle: the smell. It is not described as bad, just unfamiliar. That detail is important because it signals that something is off without immediately showing it. Smell is closely tied to memory and personal space, so noticing a difference suggests that someone else has been there, living and moving around. This creates quiet tension before any visual confirmation appears. It allows the audience to feel the unease gradually instead of jumping straight into a dramatic reveal. As he walks through the house, everything appears unchanged at first. This delay builds suspense. The audience knows something is wrong, but there is a brief moment where it seemed like maybe the fears were exaggerated. That hesitation mirrors real human behavior. People often hope they are mistaken, even when evidence suggests otherwise. This pacing keeps the situation believable and prevents it from feeling rushed. The coffee mug in the sink becomes the first clear piece of physical evidence. It is a small object, but it carries significant weight because it directly contradicts the narrator's habits. He does not drink coffee, so the presence of the mug proves that someone else has been using his space. This moment is powerful because it is simple and undeniable. There is no complicated explanation, no ambiguity. It is a quiet confirmation that the house has been occupied. From there, the tension escalates quickly. The narrator's movement becomes faster, reflecting his rising anxiety. He checks different parts of the house, searching for more signs. This shift in pacing mirrors the emotional intensity. The audience can feel the urgency building as he tries to understand the full extent of the situation. Each room he checks increases anticipation, leading toward a larger discovery. The spare room reveal serves as the central turning point. The partially open door already signals that something is different. When he pushes it and sees the mattress, blankets, and personal items, the situation becomes undeniable. This is no longer about someone briefly entering the house. Someone has been living there. The presence of a backpack and charger suggests ongoing use, not a one-time intrusion. This transforms the narrative from suspicion into confirmed violation. The emotional response here is layered. Anger appears first, which is natural when personal boundaries are crossed. But underneath that anger is fear. This distinction is important because it shows the depth of the situation. Anger alone would suggest confrontation, but fear introduces vulnerability. The narrator realizes that whoever did this had access, time, and confidence. That realization makes the situation feel controlled and deliberate, rather than random. The idea that this is organized begins to take shape. The setup in the room is not chaotic. It is functional, intentional. This suggests planning, which raises the stakes even further. The narrator is no longer dealing with an unknown intruder acting impulsively. He is dealing with something structured, possibly involving multiple people or a system. Calling the HOA at this point represents a shift toward seeking accountability. The narrator is no longer questioning whether something happened. He knows it did. Now he wants answers. The lack of response from the HOA increases suspicion and frustration. It suggests avoidance, which reinforces the idea that they may be involved in some way. This moment pushes the story forward into confrontation, where the narrator is ready to face whoever is responsible and demand the truth.